Hello and welcome to Prelims Practice 2020, a series of videos where we guide you to excel in prelims examination with the help of past year question papers and question practices. Now this is the second video for current affairs of the month of November, and in this month very important events took place. For example, Tamil Nadu decided to legalize contract farming. Apart from that, a report came out which said that RBI had some serious concerns with respect to electoral bonds. Also, Government of India gave clear signals that India is not going to join RCEP group. And many other issues from the month of November became important, which we have taken up in this second video. Let us now begin the discussion on 10 practice questions from the second part of the November. Now in the month of November, two important developments occurred which shall have far-reaching consequences on Indian economy as well as politics. Now one of them is related to electoral bonds, whereas next one is related to the contract farming. But before solving these questions, we shall first go through the questions asked in past years to understand how UPSC formulates questions when it comes to major decisions. Now, case in point being a question asked in 2017, what are the advantage or advantages of implementing the National Agriculture Market Scheme? Statement 1. It is pan-India electronic trading portal for agricultural commodities. Statement 2. It provides the farmers access to nationwide market with prices commensurate with the quality of their produce. Now, to give you the context, it was recently that government had come up with National Agricultural Market Scheme or NAM, which is a pan-India electronic trading portal which was created to connect various APMC mandis across the country. And hence, statement 1 is correct. Statement 2 is also correct as NAM promotes uniformity, streamlining of procedures across the integrated markets, removes information asymmetry between buyers and sellers, and promotes real-time price discovery based on actual demand and supply. It also provides farmers access to nationwide market with prices commensurate with quality of their produce. So you can see that both these statements are correct. Now from this you should realize that an important step taken by Government of India in 2015 and 16 was establishment of National Agriculture Market. And UPSC came out not only with the features related to this important step, but asking you about the advantages of such a step taken by the Government of India. Which means that not only for mains examination, but also from the perspective of prelims examination, there is a need for you to be aware regarding their consequences. Now in the month of November, Tamil Nadu became the first state in the country to enact a law on contract farming, based on the lines of a model legislation put out by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare of Central Government. Now this piece of legislation passed by the state of Tamil Nadu would go a long way in protecting the farmers' interest and enhancing their income. So first we shall solve this question and then understand few things about contract farming. So the question says which of the following can be said to be the advantages of contract farming? Statement 1, improved supply chains. Statement 2, enhancement of incomes. Statement 3, access to inputs in agriculture. Statement 4, investment in food processing sector. So we have to find out that out of these advantages, which of them shall arrive because of contract farming? And the answer is D, all of them are advantages of contract farming, and that is the reason behind the Government of India coming out with a model legislation and insisting all the states to adopt such a legislation. As you know that agriculture is a state subject, and hence ultimately the step or the legislation shall be enacted by the state governments. The central government although can only help in giving them guidelines. So what is this contract farming and how is it so advantageous for our agricultural sector and especially the farmers? So under contract farming, agricultural production including livestock and poultry can be carried out based on pre-harvest agreement between buyers such as food processing units and exporters and producers which are mainly farmers or farmer producer organizations. The producer can sell the agricultural produce at a specific price in the future to the buyer as per the agreement. Now, this arrangement benefits both producers as well as the buyers, as the producers can get support from buyer for improving production through inputs such as technology, pre-harvest and post-harvest infrastructure as per the agreement. The producer can also reduce the risk of fluctuating market price and demand. On the other hand, buyer can reduce the risk of non-availability of quality produce. Now let us discuss the benefits as given in the statements. So we'll start with how will it improve the supply chains. Now, one of the biggest troubles as far as our agricultural sector is concerned has been the domination of middlemen, because of which farmers receive only 25 to 40% of prices paid by the consumers. Now, what contract farming will do, that it will streamline the supply chain and connect the farmers directly with the buyers, and hence will reduce the dependence of the farmers on the middlemen. Now, the second statement is actually a corollary of first one. Now, if you remove the middlemen, you remove their share, and hence that will lead to benefit for not only the purchasers but also the producers who are farmers, as they will receive higher share in the final price of that product. Now, coming on to the statement 3, you know that proper access to inputs has been a long-term issue for Indian agricultural sector, because 86% of Indian farming community consists of small and marginal farmers who do not have access to financial and other kinds of resources in order to utilize these inputs. Now, contract farming will enable the better access to not only capital but also technology, extension services, because after entering into contract, a farmer will be insured of his or her income in the future, and this surety will embolden him or her to access these inputs. Now, moving on to the fourth and final statement, which says that contract farming will lead to higher investment in food processing sector. Now, this statement is true because of many reasons. Now, the first is that so far direct procurement is not allowed. So currently you cannot bypass the mandi setup, and hence a lot of multinationals and other rich people are not interested in investing food processing industry. Now, the direct procurement from farmer by entering into a contract will allow food processing industry direct access to farm produce. After entering into a contract, since the prices are fixed, and hence the vulnerability of food processing sector with rising or crashing price will be eliminated, and hence there shall be higher investment in food processing sector. So I hope this discussion not only gives you a clear insight into this question, but also help you understand an important concept of economics in agriculture, that is contract farming. Let's now move on to the next important step, and that is electoral bonds. Now, in the month of November, a report came out according to which officials of Reserve Bank of India in one of their reports had warned Ministry of Finance about the threats of electoral bonds prior to its introduction through Finance Act 2017. As per RBI, there were many issues which needed consideration, and we have taken those issues in the form of disadvantages, and you have to tell which of the following can be said to be the disadvantage of the electoral bonds. Statement 1, they can be used to encourage money laundering efforts in Indian politics, thereby discrediting the entire democratic process. Statement 2, they are a kind of bearer bonds, whereby there is no trace of ownership. Statement 3, they have the potential to become currency, and if issued in sizable numbers can undermine faith in banknotes issued by RBI. Now, all these statements are correct, and we shall understand why. Now, starting with the second statement. Now, they are a kind of bearer bonds, which means that whoever carries that particular electoral bond, it shall be considered that it belongs to him or her, and hence there is no trace of the ownership. Let us understand how. For example, if a person A with a lot of black money gives cash to the person B, and this person B has an access to a lot of financial resources and has the capability to convert this black money into the white. And now this person goes to the bank and gets an electoral bond which is then transferred to A. Now, since there is no name written over electoral bonds, it is easily transferable and it is also a bearer bond. And now this person A goes to a political party and deposits those electoral bonds, which are then redeemed by that political party. So this was the main criticism which was raised by the RBI. Hence, this statement is correct. Now, the statement 1 is a corollary of statement 2 because they are a kind of bearer bonds whereby there is no trace of the ownership. They can be used to encourage money laundering efforts in Indian politics. Because money laundering is nothing but conversion of black money into white, and you saw that how person A was able to get an electoral bond even when the KYC norms are stringent, and hence 1 and 2 both are correct. Now, third statement is that they have the potential to become currency and if issued in sizable numbers can undermine faith in banknotes issued by the RBI. Now, this is also correct because before the introduction of these bearer bonds or electoral bonds, there was no time limit. But right now, this time limit is 15 days. So, for example, if a person A gets an electoral bond worth rupees 1 crore, that person can hold on to this electoral bond for a very long period of time and keep on exchanging within his or her community or among the businesses. And hence they can undermine the credit of our Indian banking system, which is based on Indian rupee. And they might become a parallel system where various kinds of electoral bonds are just exchanged. Even though the government has reduced the time limit for redeeming these bonds to 15 days, but still, according to RBI, they have the potential to become a parallel currency. So the right answer is D, 1, 2 and 3. Let's now move on to the next question.
In the month of November, National Highway Authority of India or NHAI was about to raise up to 2000 crore through the sale of masala bonds in order to fund the construction of highways in India. So it becomes important for us to understand this important concept which is known as masala bonds. Also in the past year, UPSC has asked questions related to this. For example, the question in 2016 with reference to IFC masala bonds sometimes seen in news, which of the statements given below are correct? Statement 1, the International Finance Corporation which offers these bonds is an arm of World Bank. Statement 2, they are the rupee denominated bonds and are a source of debt financing for the public and private sector. Now both these statements are correct because till 2016 the International Finance Corporation was the only organization to have released these masala bonds. And the second statement is obviously correct because they are the rupee denominated bonds and are a source of debt financing for the public and private sector. And hence the right answer was C, both 1 and 2. So similarly, we have designed this question to test further concepts related to masala bonds. With reference to masala bonds, sometimes seen in news, which of the statements given below are correct? Statement 1, the currency risks in these bonds are borne by the investor. Now this is an important statement. And this is the reason why masala bonds are preferred by Indian companies. Now to understand the relevance of masala bond, one needs to understand the downside risk in dollar denominated bonds through a real example. For example, let's assume a company ABC Limited issued dollar denominated bonds to the tune of $200 million at interest rate of 5%. Now the exchange rate at that point of time was 55 rupees per dollar. Thus, the company effectively brought in rupees 1100 crore to be deployed into Indian business. But when the bonds were redeemed after 5 years, the exchange rate became whopping 69 rupees per dollar. Now, this company ABC Limited will therefore require rupees 1380 crore to repay the $200 million to its lenders. Therefore, apart from interest that the company has already paid, it will have to shell out an additional 280 crore rupees due to this rupee depreciation. So obviously this is the kind of currency cost that most Indian companies cannot afford. So what masala bonds do is that they transfer the currency risk from the issuer to the borrower, that is to investor. Because the Indian company which is issuing the bond or which needs the money issues them in rupee. But since these bonds are denominated in rupee terms, then obviously no question of exchange rate volatility arises, and hence the Indian companies are shielded of those risks. And hence the statement 1 is correct. Now the second statement is that RBI cannot make any intervention in the functioning of these bonds, now which is incorrect. Now, you should keep in mind that one of the primary functions of RBI is to act as custodian of India's foreign exchange reserves and various other financial transactions between India and other countries. And hence, anything which has to do with finances going into and outside India cannot be beyond the regulations formed by RBI. And similarly, RBI has come out with notifications from time to time to regulate the functioning of these masala bonds. For example, the minimum maturity period of these bonds, the minimum amount which can be raised, or the companies which can raise such bonds. And hence, the second statement is incorrect, which leads us to the right answer, A, one only. Now, a very important development in the terms of free trade agreement took place in November, when the government of India decided to remain outside the proposed RCEP trade agreement, which was negotiated between ASEAN and its 6 free trade partner countries. Now, India has officially stated that the present form of RCEP agreement does not fully reflect the basic spirit and the agreed guiding principles of RCEP. And later on in the month of December, RCEP finally took off without India. So it becomes important for us to cover this important topic. UPSC has also asked questions with reference to RCEP. For example, this question in 2018, consider the following countries. Statement 1, Australia; 2, Canada; 3, China; 4, India; 5, Japan; and 6, US. Which of the above are the free trade partners of ASEAN? So basically, UPSC wanted to test your knowledge that whether you are able to relate free trade partners of ASEAN with that of RCEP or not, because the RCEP is basically all those countries which already have FTAs with ASEAN. And the countries which do not have that are Canada and USA. So you have to eliminate those options where 2 and 6 are not present, which leads us to the right answer, C, 1, 3, 4 and 5. Australia, China, India and Japan. So let's solve this question. India has recently decided to remain outside RCEP. Which of the following is our reasons behind such a decision? So with respect to India's decision to not go ahead with RCEP is important for us to understand, and hence we have formulated this question. We shall discuss them one by one. Now, statement 1 says excessive trade deficit with most member countries. Now, this is correct, as India has around $104 billion trade deficit with the RCEP member countries, which is around 65% of India's total trade deficit. So, if this is the total trade deficit of the India, then around 65% is that with those of RCEP members. On top of that, RCEP agreement forced India to eliminate tariffs on almost 90% of the imported goods over the next 15 years. Hence, India was apprehensive that RCEP agreement would lead to increase in its trade deficit, particularly with countries such as China. And hence, this statement is correct. Now, the second statement says bad experience of past FTAs, which is also correct. Now, the FTAs with Japan and South Korea have led to substantial increase in import of goods into the domestic market, leading to adverse impact on domestic manufacturing. India was apprehensive that RCEP would enable China to dump its goods in Indian domestic market, leading to an adverse impact on our domestic industry. Now, moving on to the third statement, which is very important for us to understand also, which says disagreement over base year for elimination of tariffs. Now, this is also correct. Now, under the RCEP agreement, the member countries are required to reduce the tariffs on various goods and services by a certain margin as compared to the base year. Now, let us understand this with the help of example. Let us say the custom duty in India on a particular product X was 10% in 2013 and was subsequently increased to 15% by 2019. Now, if the RCEP countries are required to reduce the custom duty by 5% every year, and if we apply the base year of 2013, then the custom duty would have to be reduced to 5%, whereas the base of 2019 would lead to the reduction in custom duty to 10%. Thus, the base year of 2019 would offer higher protection to Indian domestic industry. While the negotiations were going on, India insisted that the base year should be that of 2019 and not 2013, whereas RCEP countries did not agree to this. and hence the disagreement over base year for elimination of tariffs was one of the reasons behind taking such a decision. Now, fourth and final term is very important for us to understand, which is ratchet clause. Now, what is this ratchet clause? Now, ratchet basically means a screw which turns only in one direction, up or down, but not both ways. Now, this concept is proposed to be applied in RCP, which will disallow the member countries to increase the import duties once reduced. So, if you have reduced import duty once, you cannot increase them. Now, this concept is proposed to be applied in RCP, which will disallow the member country to increase the import duties once reduced. Now, the Indian government wanted the RCP member countries to adopt safeguard mechanisms which should enable the countries to increase the tariffs on certain products when there is a surge in imports. However, the RCP member countries did not agree to this exception, and hence all 1, 2, 3 and 4 are correct, which leads us to the right answer, D. Now, apart from this, it is important to understand that there was one major agreement which was related to rules of origin. Now, which goods to be included in the list of goods entitled for concessional import duties is left to be decided to the respective importing country. Such list will be country specific. For example, garments imported from China may not be offered concessional import duties, but garments from Thailand may enjoy concessional duty. Now, one of the major apprehension of India was that in order to circumvent this situation, it is possible for an exporter to import garments from China to Thailand and later re-export the same consignment to India so as to enjoy the concessional duties. This is how the rules of origin system can be beaten. India demands stricter measures to ensure principles of routes of origin are adhered to. However, RCP member countries wanted to adopt liberalized rules of origin which would have affected India's interest. So this is one important concept which can be asked in prelims examination. For example, what is a ratchet clause or what are rules of origin? So keep that in mind. Let's now move on to the next question. Now, in the month of November, the Supreme Court gave a verdict as to what constitutes adjusted gross revenue of telecom companies in India. Now, such a verdict is going to have grave consequences for the telecom sector, as it would require telecom companies to pay around 1.4 lakh crores to government, including penalty and interest on pending AGR dues. Now, this is considered to be significant because telecom companies have accumulated higher debt of around rupees 7 lakh crores. Hence, the recent ruling of Supreme Court could end up adversely affecting not only the telecom sector but the entire Indian economy as well. So in this regard, let us solve this question to understand what AGR is. With reference to adjusted gross revenue recently seen in news, consider the following statements. Statement 1. It is the net revenue of the company after removing tax payments. Now this is incorrect because AGR basically refers to the total revenue earned by the telecom companies in India. Now, as you know, that telecom operators earn revenue from both core, that is telecom services, as well as from non-core activities, for example, sale of assets, sale of mobile handsets, interest earned from banks and deposits. Now, the controversy arose on account of differences between the government and telecom operators as to what constitutes the AGR. The telecom operators wanted the AGR should include only the revenue earned by them through the core activities of provisions of telecom services. However, the government wanted that AGR should include revenues earned from both core as well as non-core activities. And hence statement 1 is clearly wrong because it is not the net revenue of the company after removing the tax payments. Now, statement 2 says it is used to calculate license fee and spectrum usage charges. Now, this is the reason why the companies are so hell-bent on not revising the definition of the AGR, because the way AGR is calculated is significant because it is used to calculate the license fee and spectrum usage charges, which the telecom operators are required to pay to the government. For instance, the license fee is calculated as 3% of the AGR and spectrum usage charges is calculated as 3% of AGR. So you can see that the way AGR is calculated is very significant as far as the viability of these telecom sector companies are concerned. Now, as far as the implication of the Supreme Court verdict is concerned, it is likely to have grave impact on telecom sector because the telecom sector is already reeling under the higher debt levels of almost around 7 lakh crores, and hence the recent Supreme Court judgment is set to put further burden on them. The lower finances of the telecom operators would reduce their ability to undertake investment in new age technologies such as 5G. Further, concerns over sustained losses in future could force companies such as Vodafone to shut their operations in India. Not only this, it is going to have impact on banking sector as well, because the telecom sectors are required to pay off debt of almost around 7 lakh crores. Hence, the recent Supreme Court ruling would reduce the ability of telecom companies to give back their loans, leading to increase in NPA levels of Indian banks. Now you need to clear the concepts regarding adjusted gross revenues, which has been covered in our DNS as well as Focus magazine many times. Now, after the Supreme Court came up with its ruling, the government is thinking of coming out with a relief package for telecom sector. Let's now move on to the next question. Now, this question is related to basic concept of economy, which is calculation of GDP. Now, calculation of GDP plays an important role in any country's economy because almost all of the steps taken by the government are based on the estimates of GDP, which basically shows how the economy of a country is performing. Now, before solving this question, let's have a look at a question asked in 2015 examination to understand how UPSC has asked questions related to GDP. With reference to Indian economy, consider the following statements. Statement 1. The rate of growth of real GDP has steadily increased in the last decade. Statement 2. The GDP at market prices in rupees has steadily increased in the last decade. Now, this particular question highlights the significance to read the question very carefully. Because in the first statement, it just talks about rate of growth and it does not talk about GDP, which is the case with the second statement. Now, statement 1 is incorrect because the rate of growth of real GDP has fluctuated a lot during the last decade. Even though the question was asked in 2015, but let's say if it is asked in 2020 again, the statement 1 would still be wrong because you have seen that growth rate of the country's GDP has fluctuated a lot. For instance, in last 3 to 4 years, it has touched 6.5%. So you can see that it is not an increasing function. But statement 2 is correct because it does not talk about growth rate. It just says that GDP at market price has steadily increased. Now, most countries across the world, leaving aside 1 or 2, because the inflation keeps the GDP at market prices increasing every year. And hence, the second statement is correct, which leads us to the right answer, P2 only. Now, similarly, we have designed this question. And the reason why we have designed this question from the current affairs of month November, National Statistical Office in the month of November proposed to replace the existing base year from the existing one to that of 2017 and 18 for calculating the GDP estimates in India. Now, such periodic changes in the base year are carried out every 7 to 10 years in order to reflect the changing economic structure and relative prices of the goods and services. Now, apart from the periodic changes in the base year, what is equally critical is the methodology and database used for calculating the GDP estimates in an economy. Unless the methodology adopted and database used for calculating GDP estimates are foolproof, the GDP estimates would not be reliable and would not inspire confidence and trust, and this led to a large debate in the month of November. So we have framed this question with reference to calculation of GDP in India. Consider the following statements. Statement 1. Current base year is 2011 and 12, which is correct. Currently, all the GDP estimates are based on the base year 2011 and 12. And the second statement says currently it is calculated using factor cost method. Now, this statement is incorrect because earlier the GDP estimation was based on GDP at factor cost, but the changes made in 2015 led to the migration of the method from GDP at factor cost to GDP at market prices. Now, GDP at factor cost measures the cost to businesses to employ the 4 factors of production, whereas GDP at market prices include the prices consumer will pay for the goods on the market. Now, another important information to remember from the perspective of GDP calculation in India right now is the database on the basis of which this GDP calculation is conducted. Now, earlier it used to be the RBI's database, but right now a database known by the name of MCA 21, which is maintained by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, is used. Let's now move on to the next question. Now, in the month of November, a report came out by the name of Global Microscope on Financial Inclusion. So, in this regard, let us first understand what UPSC has asked related to these important reports and indices in the past. For example, in 2018, UPSC asked, Rule of Law Index is released by which of the following? Statement A, Amnesty International. Statement B, International Court of Justice. Statement C, the Office of United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights. Statement D, World Justice Project. And the right answer was World Justice Project. Now, the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index measures how the rule of law is experienced and perceived by general public across the globe. It is the world's leading source for original, independent data on the rule of law. But at the time it appeared in the newspaper, it was considered not so important. But it was finally asked in 2018. Similarly, this particular report is also very important, and hence the question, Global Microscope on Financial Inclusion report is released by which of the following? Statement A, IMF. Statement B, World Bank. Statement C, Economic Intelligence Unit. And Statement D, none of the above. And the right answer is C, Economist Intelligence Unit. Now, this report seeks to rank around 55 countries across the world on the basis of conducive environment created by them to promote financial inclusion. It mainly looks at 5 domains that are necessary to promote financial inclusion: government and policy support, stability and integrity, products and outlets, consumer protection and infrastructure. Now, the 2019 Global Microscope features 11 new gender-focused indicators that measure financial inclusion for both men and women. These new indicators can help policymakers identify areas that could potentially improve women's ability to access and use the financial tools they need to thrive. Now, there are 3 major highlights of the report. Now, as far as the ranking is concerned, the overall enabling environment for financial inclusion has improved globally. Latin America remains the region with the most conducive regulatory and policy environment for financial inclusion. Now, as far as gender disparity is concerned, at present only 25% of the countries collect and publish comprehensive gender-related data on demand and supply for financial products. An important thing regarding India is that it has been ranked at 5th place in the latest report. The report has highlighted some of the recent RBI's policy initiatives to promote financial inclusion, which are preparation of a draft national strategy, setting up of a high-level committee to review existing status of digitization, and release of enabling framework for regulatory sandbox, which will allow financial technology startups to live test innovative products and services. Now, as far as Economist Intelligence Unit is concerned, it is a research arm of Economist Group which publishes the Economist newspaper. It helps governments, institutions, and businesses by providing timely, reliable, and impartial analysis of economic and development strategies. Let's now move on to the next question. Index of Industrial Production, a very important index to monitor industrial activity. Now, data of September came out in the month of November, which showed that industrial activity in the country sharply contracted to minus 4.3%. Now, this was driven majorly by the slowdown in capital goods, mining and manufacturing sector. So, in this regard, it becomes important to cover this very important index which monitors industrial activity through various sources in the country right now. But before that, let's have a look at what kinds of questions UPSC has asked. For example, this question in 2012, in India, in the overall index of industrial production, the indices of 8 core industries have a combined weightage of 37.9%. Which of the following are among those 8 core industries? Cement, fertilizers, natural gas, refinery products, and textiles. Now, the right answer is that it does not include textiles and only includes cement, fertilizers, natural gas, refinery products, which leads us to the right answer C, 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. So the question has been designed as, with reference to index of industrial production, consider the following statements. Statement 1, it is compiled by National Statistical Office. Now, this is correct statement because it is compiled and published every month. Keep in mind that it is published every month by National Statistical Office of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Now, the second statement says that highest weightage in the index is that of primary goods, but lowest weight is given to intermediate goods. Now, before going into the weightage, let us first discuss what are the various categories which IIP takes. Now, there are two kinds of classification. Now, one is sectoral, in which industrial production for the purpose of IIP is divided into mining, manufacturing, and electricity, where the highest weightage is given to manufacturing. Now, use-based classification is the second criteria on which the categorization in IIP is done, which is primary goods, capital goods, infrastructure or construction goods, intermediate goods, consumer durables, consumer non-durables. Now, out of these, highest weightage is given to primary goods, but lowest weightage is given to capital goods and not intermediate goods, or any product produced as incomplete product or which goes as input in production for further finishing or forming a part of a final product, for example, plywood or cotton yarn. So statement 2 is clearly wrong, which leads us to the right answer A, 1 only. Now, it is important to remember that index of industrial production measures the quantum of changes in the industrial production in an economy and captures the general level of industrial activity in the country. The current base year for IIP series in India is 2011 and 12. So if the current IIP reads as 107, it means that there has been a 7% growth compared to the base year, which is 2011 and 12. Let's now move on to the next question. Now this question is on a very important concept, which is randomized controlled trial, and it is somewhat related to the Nobel Prize in 2019 economics, which has been given to Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo. We'll understand what randomized controlled trial is through this question, and then we'll go into and understand what these two people have done to deserve a Nobel Prize. So the question is, with reference to randomized controlled trial, consider the following statements. Statement 1, it was invented by Nobel laureates Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo. Now this is incorrect, because this randomized controlled trial technique was not invented by these two people. It already existed, especially in biological sciences. But what these two people did is that they imported this method into economics research. So the application of randomized controlled trial in developmental economics through the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL, which is a global network of anti-poverty researchers that conducts field experiments, is said to have transformed the field of developmental economics and poverty policies therefore. Is said to have transformed the field of development economics and poverty policies henceforth. And that's why these two people got Nobel Prize. Now next statement says it is a trial in which subjects are randomly assigned to one of the two groups. One, which is the experimental group, which is the target group, receiving the intervention that is being tested, and the other, the comparison or the control group, which is receiving an alternative or the conventional treatment. Now this is correct. Now randomized controlled trial is a tool often used in life sciences, commonly in clinical trial of drugs to assess the efficacy of drugs and their treatment before it is introduced in the market. Now, as we just discussed, it is a trial in which subjects are randomly assigned to one of the two groups, and depending upon the performance of one group with respect to other, the efficacy of the treatment is monitored. The two groups are then followed up to see if there are any differences between them in the outcome. The results and subsequent analysis of the trial are used to assess the effectiveness of the intervention, which is the extent to which a treatment, procedure, or service does patients more harm or good. Now, RCTs are most stringent way of determining whether a cause-effect relationship exists between the intervention and the outcome. Now, this year's Nobel laureates conducted multiple experiments using randomized controlled trial to study social policies relating to poverty. In this approach, the researchers broke down the larger problem into smaller questions. Experiments are carried out in the field on these smaller questions using RCT. For example, impact of subsidies in preventive health care, whether incentives help in increasing immunization coverage, or what is the impact of microfinance on development. Based on these experiments, they conclude that RCTs are the simplest and best way of assessing the impact of a program, and thus should be the tool of choice for evidence-based research on social policies. However, you should also at the same time know that there are few flaws with the RCT model application in social sciences. For example, in social sciences, breaking down of broader problem into smaller questions may lead to ignoring of a critical variable. This may dilute the scientific method and thus may affect the conclusions. Further, for an experiment to be random, the participants should be ignorant about which group they belong to. However, such kind of blinding is almost impossible to implement in economic experiments, as participants would definitely know if they get any financial aid or training or not. However, notwithstanding the above criticism, RCTs have transformed development economics and made policy making more evidence-based, thus impacting social policies worldwide. Now, this last question in today's discussion deals with a very important development in the field of health, which was the release of National Health Profile 2019. So the question, with reference to National Health Profile 2019, consider the following statements. It was released by Central Bureau of Health Intelligence, which is a statutory body. Now this, although looks incorrect, but it is a correct statement. As Central Bureau of Health Intelligence is a statutory body established by the Act of Parliament on the recommendation of Mudaliar Committee, and it comes under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, statement 2 is also correct, as National Health Profile is published annually since 2005 and which brings together all health related information in a single platform. Now, as far as the National Health Profile is concerned, it is a compilation of major health related information. It broadly covers 6 areas, including demographic indicators, social economic indicators, health status indicators, health financing, human resource for health sector, and health infrastructure. Now, as far as the key highlights of 2019 report is concerned, it confirmed that India is witnessing an epidemiological transition where non-communicable diseases dominate over communicable in total diseases burden of the country. And to substantiate the fact, we can see that disease burden from non-communicable diseases increased from 30 to 55% in a matter of around 25 years. And they are a reason for around 62% of the mortality out of total. The major non-communicable diseases include heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension. Now, as far as the major concerns are concerned, they are low public spending on health, which is around 1.28% of the GDP, a large interstate disparities, high out-of-pocket expenditure, which according to WHO is around 68% of the total expenditure on health, low insurance penetration, and low doctor-to-patient ratio. So these are the important facts which you should keep mainly from the perspective of mains examination. But from the perspective of prelims examination, it is important to remember that CBHI is a statutory body under Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and it comes out with National Health Profile every year since the year 2005, which collates all health related data on a single platform.